Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group, Agentic AI in the federal government. Former USDA CIO Jonathan Alboum joins the podcast to discuss that and much more. It's Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you will hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's dive into the day's top headlines. President Donald Trump's fiscal 2026 budget proposal would slash $491 million from the budget of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, according to a summary released last Friday. That would amount to a nearly 17% reduction to the agency's approximately $3 billion budget. The administration did not release a detailed itemization of the cuts, only an outline. A summary of the cuts explains that, quote, the budget refocuses CISA on its core mission, federal network defense, and enhancing the security and resilience of critical infrastructure, while eliminating weaponization and waste. In broad strokes, if approved by Congress, the budget would target for reduction what it identified as, quote, so-called disinformation and misinformation programs in offices, duplicative programs of other programs at the state and federal level, external engagement offices such as international affairs, and consolidate redundant security advisors and programs. Neither CISA nor the Office of Management and Budget immediately answered questions about what specific programs or offices would face elimination or reduction. The budget summary says that CISA programs were a hub of, quote, the censorship industrial complex to violate the First Amendment, target Americans for protected speech, and target the president, and that the budget eliminates programs focused on so-called misinformation and propaganda. In other news, a startup founder and Department of Government Efficiency associate named Sam Korkos is the new Chief Information Officer of the Treasury Department, according to a person within the agency. According to that person, Korkos was introduced with that title at a recent meeting for Treasury Bureau Chief Information Officers. Korkos, who most recently helped create a health company called Levels, had been representing DOGE in the Treasury Department with the official title of Special Advisor. Korkos, who has appeared on Fox News with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, has said his top priority is looking at the operations and maintenance budget, as well as modernization of the IRS. He's also sought access to government data and, according to Wired, was involved in an effort to organize an IRS hackathon. A source familiar with the initiative told FedScoop that the event was focused on the implementation of a unified API infrastructure. Korkos' appointment comes as many longtime technology leaders have departed the Treasury Department. Tony Arcady left the role of CIO earlier this year. And last week, FedScoop reported that Jeff King, who was appointed to replace him, would also be leaving, along with Brian Peretti, the agency's Chief Technology Officer, and Rick Therian, its Chief Information Security Officer. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, make sure to visit fedscoop.com. As generative AI increasingly takes hold across the federal government, a class of that greater tech discipline called Agentic AI is also gaining momentum. Think of it like an AI sidekick. Agentic AI moves beyond rules-based AI assistants of the past to act autonomously to accomplish something without the need for constant human intervention. According to Jonathan Alboum, federal CTO of ServiceNow and a former federal CIO at USDA, Agentic AI holds massive potential for the future of the federal government, particularly amid the Trump administration's slashing of the federal workforce and placing a premium on efficiency. Alboum joins the podcast to discuss that, as well as some exciting news from ServiceNow's Knowledge Conference this week in Las Vegas, and his thoughts on how federal CIOs are managing ongoing consolidation of federal IT programs. Let's go now to that interview with Jonathan Alboum. Jonathan, great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining the Daily Scoop podcast.
Billy, thanks for having me on.
I think you're one of our most frequent flyers these days. It's been a couple times over the last year or so, but it's always good to catch up. You're an expert in the federal technology space, obviously a former CIO in the federal government, and now at ServiceNow on the public sector side. So you've got a great marriage of both sides of the equation to kind of bring to today's trends and topics. So can't wait to dig in with you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited to get started.
So obviously, we're recording the week before this big event, Knowledge, that ServiceNow is putting on. It starts next Tuesday. The episode will go out Tuesday, so we'll talk about it sort of in future tense. But for listeners, know that the conference is currently going on. So, Jonathan, I hear there's going to be some big announcements focused on the public sector coming out at Knowledge. Tell me more about that and what sort of exciting things you have to share.
Yeah, so Knowledge is our biggest event of the year at ServiceNow, and this year I understand we're going to have upwards of 20,000 attendees, which is
Great.
really incredible. Partners, we're going to have customers, we're going to have some of my colleagues at ServiceNow, and it's just exciting to be a part of that. And every year at Knowledge we make some big announcements, and we're going to be talking about technology partnerships. At Knowledge, we're going to be making some announcements about AI agents and other capabilities coming to the public sector. So we have AI agents that operate in ServiceNow in our commercial environments today, and in on-premise environments. But in our government community cloud, which is a FedRAMP high impact level 4 environment, they're not there yet, but they're going to be coming soon, and we're going to be talking about that at Knowledge. So by the time people are hearing this, there's going to be a published plan for their availability, and it's going to be not just the agents that can do work in ServiceNow, but an AI agent orchestrator and an AI agent studio. So customers can take the AI agent concept and apply it to unique things inside their environment. So that's all really exciting. It's a great use of generative AI technologies. And we recognize also, and I certainly see this from my time in government and as CIO, that AI and great outcomes in any technology environment rely on having good data. So we're very focused on data at ServiceNow, and also at Knowledge. We're announcing that RaptorDB, which is a proprietary database built for ServiceNow, is going to be available in our government community cloud. The operations on RaptorDB are many, many, many times faster than what people have experienced using ServiceNow previously. And also, we're going to be talking about and announcing our workflow data fabric, which allows the really simple connection of data sources from across the environment onto the ServiceNow platform. And when those different data sources are readily available, and they're available for workflows, they're available to be used by the AI agents, they're available to people at the right place at the right time, they can make the right decision. And we can really move to this to the vision that we've had for several years in the government, that data is a strategic asset, and we're using it to drive intelligence-based decision making in our agencies. And I think all those things are really exciting. Those are going to be some of the big public sector announcements that that will be announced at Knowledge and available by the time people are hearing this podcast, or available
Great.
for planning by the time people hear the podcast.
Well, that's really exciting. And, one of the last times we talked, you mentioned Agentic AI, those agents. And since then, I've heard a lot about it and really trying to wrap my head around it in the public sector context. So tell me more. I get the understanding agent is, and you'll probably correct me, that it's not as reductive or as simple as a bot that goes out and sort of does those things. But tell me what it is and sort of how it works in the public sector sense.
That's a great, it's a great segue, Billy, because agents are going to be everywhere. Everyone's already talking about it, but I think oftentimes, because it's a new concept, we can, be reductive and say, oh, it's just a smarter bot. Well, it's beyond this, because these agents are, they're really generative AI systems, and they can interact with their environments. They can gather data. They can make recommendations, or they can actually go ahead and make decisions, and they can complete tasks that otherwise would have been done by a person. And why is that important in the Fed space? I think in the Fed space, we're going to have fewer employees going forward. This is not a secret. Everybody can read the same news articles. We know that the size of the government is shrinking, both employees and contractors. So we have to be able to meet the demands of our customers, the users of government, the citizens, the public, and deliver them great service experiences. And I think agents are going to be a way that we do that. And what makes it really different than the bot? What's new about it? I think it's this idea that as is sort of describing, these agents are able to synthesize information and then they can make decisions, based on that, based on some sort of process that they understand, and they can be autonomous. They're not necessarily replacing people in all cases, but they can be thoughtful, they can be thinking, they can interact with other AI agents, and you have the opportunity to solve a person's problem using these agents, because maybe the first agent encounters the problem and they know how to do their piece of it. And then based on what they've learned, they can contact the correct next agent who can contact another agent who can get a result, get an outcome. And, it's a really, it's not different than how people might work. But the idea that we can use these pieces of generative AI technology inside ServiceNow, or you'll see them across different technologies. We know this already. Doing this kind of work, changes the paradigm about how government delivers service. We have the opportunity, using these technologies to really redefine that service delivery. And I think it's very exciting for anyone who's part of this conversation right now, because this is what we've been talking about in different forms for a long time. It's a version of customer experience, is a version of automation. It's a version of service delivery that's going to mirror the way the best commercial brands deliver services to their customers. So I think it's all really exciting right now.
Yeah, and just as a quick follow-up, you mentioned it's something that's already live, and you're internally using it at ServiceNow on the
Right.
commercial side. What are some of those use cases, at least on the more successful side, and are there applicable or kind of analogs on the public sector side that would be good fits for such an application?
Yeah. So inside ServiceNow, we're always customer zero. So we have a program at ServiceNow called Now on Now, where we use ServiceNow to run the company. So when we're out there talking about how we might solve a problem inside a government agency, we do it with the understanding of how we solved a similar problem inside our company. And I think that is a really great way to have that conversation, especially when you can do it practitioner to practitioner. And when it comes to agents, we're putting these to work inside ServiceNow, and we measure the value of our technology investments. And we've measured over $325 million of annualized value across the company by using agents. And we've saved upwards of 400,000 labor hours.
Wow.
We see 20% productivity increases. The customer self-service rate has increased by 84%. So, what does that mean for me as someone who works in an environment where I get service through agents? I can spend more time focused on my job. I have the opportunity to be engaged with customers or my colleagues at ServiceNow in really productive ways. I'm not doing I'm not on the phone with a person trying to get my computer fixed or get a new mouse or change my address or things like this. All this stuff has been automated using these agents in a way that makes the administrative elements of my work really simple. And that's the value that these can bring into government. So we have lots of people in government who provide service, or they work on programs, they do fraud detection, they're doing things that are really important, and we can get them more focused on their work, and we can get them more focused on serving the customer and less focused on doing these sort of the mundane things that we know are ripe for automation. They're perfect for an agent to do. We can overcome, in my opinion, some of the staffing changes that we've dealt with. People wonder, well, how government delivers service with fewer employees. We're going to use technologies like this, in my opinion. And I think we have the opportunity to be very successful in doing so, and an opportunity for government to lead the way, because I think this is the future of how organizations that deliver service do that delivery.
So I think and earlier in a conversation, I think you couched it pretty well. We all see the what's happening the changing shape and sort of look and feel of the federal government, and ultimately, efficiency is the name of the game today
Mhm.
in the federal government under the Trump administration 2.0. So, talk to me, more about that. And one thing that we're hearing as part of that efficiency play is really the demand for the federal government to be closer to private sector organizations, so that tech adoption, there's less barriers in between, so that things can happen more quickly. So tell me what you're seeing from your point of view, but also how this government efficiency drive is really playing out from your perspective.
So when I look back at some of the work that I've been involved in over the last few months since the administration started, lots and lots of conversations about how agencies standardize on technology, standardize on platforms like ServiceNow, how things are, um, how complexity is taken out of the equation by doing things in a few ways and instead of many, many, many ways. And that efficiency, whether it's driven by generative AI or through organization changes or other kinds of things, that efficiency is key to what we're talking about here. And I think generative AI is a great way to drive that efficiency. But I'll go back to something we talked about earlier in the podcast, this idea of data. And it's generative AI when it's blended with data. And data really is maybe where we should even start because you can't do the AI really well without the data. But when you have that AI and you have the data, and then you add on a workflow technology like we offer in ServiceNow, you have an incredibly powerful combination to drive not just efficient and effective government, but one that costs less because you can really use those workflows and the data, that AI to understand the operation and know where you have the opportunities to take out cost and do that. Maybe you'll see it in the context of software asset management, where agencies are really being they're really being thoughtful about what their relationships look like with software vendors and how much software they own. You'll see it in places like that. You'll see it in the federal footprint, where we have fewer buildings ultimately, potentially fewer fleet vehicles. The things that the government manages, I think we can manage in a better, more efficient way by using these kinds of technologies. And those things drive efficiency. The agents drive efficiency. Being able to make good decisions because you have the right data in the right place with the right person, the right time, and they can make a really good decision about how to operate the agency. Those things, added together, along with this idea of standardizing and centralizing some of these activities, drive efficiency. And those are the conversations that I'm having with people I work with in the federal government on a pretty routine basis. That's where the action really is right now, and I think it's going to stay there for a little while longer. As we ultimately eventually move into a very strong modernization phase, I think.
So, Jonathan, we've talked about a lot of things. There's a lot of shifts in the trends, sort of themes, really the ecosystem of federal IT. One of the big ones we've also noticed is really the shifting dynamic of the CIO role. We've talked previously about sort of the shift from career to political and how that has implications. We've also seen a lot of consolidation where the Trump administration's put a premium on that top level, department level CIO being the decision maker, and really potentially eliminating or reducing the role of others under them. So with all these changes, consolidation, elevation of changing from career to political, and really, what we talked about just a moment ago, that focus on commercial tech, having been a federal CIO, what would you be thinking about? What would your thoughts be at this moment, trying to navigate these changes that are ongoing in this administration?
So I'm going to begin with the headline from my perspective, is that these kinds of changes are very positive. I think to the extent that that top level CIO position can be responsible for the operations, the network, email, the infrastructure that the work resides on, the lower level organizations, the agencies, the bureaus, whether they have someone with the title of CIO or some other title, I think is sort of irrelevant, because those places where the business happens, where the customers are served, where the programs are run, those are the organizations in my experience that they really understand the data, and they understand the business process. They understand what it takes to deliver on their mission. And to the extent that there's an IT organization or a business technology organization or systems or whatever it's called in a future state, that organization doesn't have to also be thinking about infrastructure and connectivity and network and phones and cybersecurity and these things that, I think are moving up the stack, and they can be focused on their data and their systems and really how they get value out of their technology investments to drive positive outcomes for the people they serve. I think those are really good changes. The challenge with any of these things is in the change management. How do we make these shifts and these adjustments, irrespective of where that central IT organization is at the department or another agency that's providing that service? Again, as long as we manage the change and we set up pretty clear roles and responsibilities for the central service provider and the organizations that it serves, and how they ideally would focus on their data and systems and business process, customer service delivery, I think they could be a really successful model. I've tried to do things like that when I was in government, and I had some success, but it's hard really to go all the way and make those big changes, because you have to be able to provide a very high quality service to the people that you're providing that new service to. And it's really possible today. I think we have a great chance to do this successfully because we have the right technologies. We have technology platforms like ServiceNow that can help to automate many of those IT operations tasks. And we just have to do it. And again, in my opinion, we have to do it in the right way, so we minimize the risk of failures, or we minimize the risk of cybersecurity incidents or service delivery challenges. And if we do that, I think we can have a really focused IT model going forward that is going to be good for government and good for the people that are served by government.
That's great, Jonathan. Well, as always, I appreciate your context, your perspective, and helping break this all down. Although this episode is going to be airing while you're there on the West Coast at Knowledge, best of luck going to that. And I'm sure if history is any indication, we'll be doing this again soon enough. But
can't wait. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. For more news on AI in the federal government, make sure to visit fedscoop.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Daily Scoop podcast, available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people to find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back tomorrow with more top headlines. Until then, I'm your host, as always, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for listening.